Hi, welcome. I want to talk to you a little bit today about tariffs, what they are, maybe a little bit about what they are not, how they're used, and how they kind of come together. There's been a lot of different topics that have come out in the news, and you're reading different articles saying, well, President Trump is doing this, the current administration is doing that, the courts are doing these things. And so I wanted to take a step back and really get into what is a tariff, how does it work, and how does it apply to you as the end consumer. And so let's dive in here. A tariff is a tax that governments place on goods coming into the country. Now, you may have heard those called duties or custom duties. Trade experts use these terms kind of interchangeably, but that's essentially what a tariff is it's a tax on things coming in. Now, the process in the United States is pretty straightforward. So if you have a ship come in and it's full of foreign goods, it's arriving at a U.S. port, then Customs and Border Protection is going to collect that tariff. The company importing the goods is the one that's paying the tax. So it's usually within 10 days of those goods clearing customs. Now, the immediate effect of this is pretty straightforward. It makes the imported goods more expensive for Americans. The reason for that being is if a product, for example, has a 25% tariff on it, and that product coming in is $100, then Customs and Border Control is going to collect that $25 tariff, and that's going to come from the importing company, the company that is bringing the funds or bringing the product here. The company, let's say we're buying from China and we're buying it for $100. Well, the Chinese company is still going to receive $100, but the end cost for the importing company is $125. Now, companies have the option to either absorb that cost or they may pass it on to the end user. It kind of varies depending on the company, depending on the reason. But you can think about a tariff basically as an economic wedge, which is driving between what a foreign seller receives and what an American payer buys. Now, what that does is it makes it more favorable or more attractive to purchase from the US, and it makes it a little bit less attractive to purchase internationally. Now, this price distortion is the core kind of mechanism that people are using when we talk about what tariffs are trying to do is they're altering an economic behavior. That's really what we're trying to do. It's discouraging those imports and it's creating more of an incentive to purchase domestically product alternatives. Now, how are these applied? They're not all used in the same way. You have ad valorem taxes, and that's taxing by value. So it's done as a percentage of the imported goods total value. For example, if you have a 15% tariff and it's on the value, like again, going back to that $100 example, that means there would be a $15 tax there. High luxury items sometimes can face a steeper rate. For example, a $5,000 imported watch might have a 20% tariff, so that might add $100 to its price. But this can create challenges for businesses. There's also specific tariffs that tax by quantity. So that can be based off of a fixed amount per unit, weight, volume. So if, for example, going back to that wristwatch example, let's say that the government charges 50 cents per wristwatch imported. It doesn't really matter whether it's a $40 watch that you can pick up at Walmart or whether it's a $5,000 luxury watch. That tariff is the 50 cents, right? So sometimes they do it by quantity. You can also do it for steel. You can do it off of weight, things of that nature. There's compound tariffs. That's more of a hybrid approach, and that takes both more percentage-based and fixed fee elements, kind of puts them together. But at the end of the day, I like to think about why are we doing what we're doing? Well, the reality is governments use tariffs to achieve a mix of different economic and political objectives. Now, these goals have shifted in priority over history, but they generally fall under three main categories: protecting domestic industries, generating revenue, and advancing and advocating for foreign policy objectives. So one of the big reasons that people do it now, and this is what President Trump has been advocating for, is around protecting domestic industries, bringing back jobs to America, things that have been taken overseas, and saying, well, we're trying to bring some things back in. We're trying to bring back manufacturing, things of that nature. That's one of the most common kind of modern justifications for tariffs. And you see this very strongly with our current administration. You also see folks that advocate for generating government revenue. Now, historically, tariffs were critical for U.S. federal funding. Throughout the early 20th century, throughout most of the 19th century, customs duties financed a substantial portion of government operations. And at one point in time, it accounted for over 90% of all federal revenue. Now, that has pivoted amazingly. That shift really occurred with what was the Underwood Tariff Act of 1913, which simultaneously lowered tariff rates, and it instituted the modern federal income tax. Now, since then, income and payroll taxes have become the dominant sources of federal revenue. I'm sure you've seen that. We feel it when we get that W-2 at the end of the year, and you realize, wait a minute, I spent how much on taxes? You've seen this major shift where tariffs have kind of fallen out of vogue from a revenue collection source. And instead, our government has been taxing us, the end user, the workers of our fine nation. And so you've seen it being used to collect government revenue. You can also see it used to advance foreign policy and securing leverage. Tariffs are very often used as an instrument of foreign and trade policy. Now, these can be deployed strategically. They can be more favorable to certain countries. They can be more prohibitive towards other countries if we're trying to exert kind of economic leverage over other nations, kind of help influence their political decisions, retaliate against perceived hostile actions. There's a lot of different ways that they can be employed. It can also serve as a negotiating tool. This is something that President Trump and his administration uses quite a bit, where it can be used to pressure other countries to lower their own trade barriers, to reduce their own tariffs, make things a little bit more even, make things a little bit more, have a little bit more reciprocity, if you will. The big thing I would say here is when it comes to tariffs, at the end of the day, it is something that the importing company is the one that's responsible for. But what it does is it doesn't give those additional dollars to the foreign country. So it doesn't tax them directly, but it also doesn't give them the benefit. And what it does is it shifts a lot of that behavior on the purchasers. And so what we find with tariffs is they can be used very strategically, but there's multiple sources for that. There's multiple reasons to use it. There's multiple ways to use it. And I would just say when you're having a conversation with tariffs, I would step back and try and understand kind of the end goal of what are we trying to accomplish here and what are we driving for. I don't want to get overly political, but I will just say this. I think we have done quite a bit of moving our manufacturing overseas, and tariffs are a way of kind of leveling the playing field and bringing some of that manufacturing back. I do also believe that when you look at it historically, yes, those tariffs were much, much higher than they are now, but it also helped us lower our income tax rate. And that's something that I think we can all agree income taxes are something that, if you look at our nation's institutions, the way everything first began, we didn't have payroll taxes. Now, the individual worker is the number one source of revenue for the IRS and the collection of those taxes. And so I think whether you are a big fan, whether you are not a fan of President Trump, regardless of your personal feelings towards this current administration and our current president, I think it's important to maybe take a step back and try and see what are we ultimately trying to accomplish here, and not necessarily listen to a bunch of news articles trying to tell you what they're doing, but rather just do some research specifically on tariffs themselves and how they're used and why they're used, and then start thinking through and kind of make your own informed decisions. Because, like I said, there's a lot of personal opinions coming out. Hopefully, this gives you a little bit more information about tariffs in general, and you understand them a little bit more clearly, or it drives you to learn a little bit more. I hope you've enjoyed this. I do always love putting these together for folks. Hope you have a beautiful day. Thanks for watching.